the middle of the earth, in the land of Shire, lives a brave little hobbit whom we all admire. With his long windpipe, fuzzy woolly toes, he lives in a hobbit hole and everybody knows him. Bilbo, Bilbo Baggins.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of In One's Kin. If you're listening to this, you may feel a little trolled because you're thinking we're doing Batman, but we had to change our plans, and we're doing something a little bit different. I hope everyone still enjoys it. I think we're going to have fun, as you can tell by the wonderful lyrical stylings of the late Leonard Nimoy.
You played it, right? You played it.
Yes.
So it means all of us are not going to be able to get that jingle out of our heads for next week.
Bilbo Baggins. He's only 3 feet tall. Yeah. Oh, hey, Veet. How's it going?
Good, mate. Good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. A little tired, but I think we're gonna have a good time. Robert, how are you doing?
I'm trying not to die.
Don't die. He apparently ate a fatal sausage. Don't do that.
I don't know what's happening here, man, but I am coughing so much. It's a good thing I use push to talk, or this could be a disaster.
Oh man, that's terrible. And as always, I am James. Oh man, so how has your week been, Veet?
Pretty quiet week. Not much really. Work and getting ready for the shows. I apologize for the short notice, guys. You are welcome to the poker night I'm hosting tonight. I'm sure if you book a Uber taxi now, you might be able to get here on time. But I do apologize for the short notice.
Anyone listening will be like, that crap was 3 days ago.
Yep.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about you guys. You're welcome to turn up. Other side of the planet, but you're welcome to turn up.
Yeah, it only takes like a day to get there. On a plane.
The Uber taxis haven't worked out how to get across oceans yet.
Uber U-boats.
There you go. Yeah, but that was my week. That's my week. Pretty quiet.
All right. How about you, Robert?
Just got done teaching classes for the quarter, so there's now a new generation of psychopathic people who are obsessed with Jigglypuff, tacos, and at some point also learned about Photoshop.
Jigglypuff!
Yes, I use Jigglypuff as a tool for educational purposes. I use Jigglypuff to show resolution and all kinds of stuff, and then I never stop talking about Jigglypuff, and Jigglypuff somehow winds up in all of the examples, and inevitably and without fail, Jigglypuff finds its way into probably about 75% of the midterm and final projects that students turn into me. And it's become kind of an in-joke. And yeah, I have the most laid-back classroom ever. I mean, we talk about video games and movies and what's happening on TV shows, and it's a very geeky atmosphere. I am basically me all the time. There is no off switch. I have no professional mode. So
yeah, I'm the same way.
In other news, I got a brand new mic because I was tired of sounding like a glitchy speck on the internet. So hopefully this sounds a lot better. And when you two speak, I don't suddenly drown out into nothingness and make the podcast sound really weird. It's like, yeah, they're responding to whatever that sound was.
Yeah, you sounded like you were on a cell phone the whole time.
I'm not. I'm on a really expensive headset, and you would have thought it'd be good, but apparently it's only good for being a raid leader.
And a new mic does wonders for the confidence. I got that last week. I listened to myself back, and I felt like I was part of the show.
Oh yeah, Veet specifically sounds like he's sitting across from me.
Yeah. That's partly what made me so angry, was because I was listening to the episode that we did. I'm just like, well, those two guys are coming through like they're just right next to me. This is crap.
Yeah.
Well, every week we learn something new and we try and make improvements. Hopefully our audience can tell that we are trying. We are serious about this. This week, I applied for a job, an exciting job too, as a paralegal. So we're going to see how that plays out. What's that?
Go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, so there's a chance that I may get to be a litigious person.
Because my question was, what is a paralegal?
So a paralegal is you assist lawyers, and you basically get to do all the stuff that isn't okay. So the way a lawyer prepares is that the paralegal basically does all the legwork. So interviews witnesses, takes their depositions, writes summaries for the lawyer.
Research.
Yeah,
research.
Go over and
Gotcha.
look at cases, look at how like the law applies to those cases to keep the lawyer from having to read all the time. So the paralegal
Gotcha.
does and is like, hey, it looks like it falls in this. You know, what do you think? You're the person who actually has the degree. And then they, form cases and stuff, but also do things like take phone calls, schedule meetings, stuff like that. But also, go out and gather evidence sometimes. So, like, take pictures of stuff, do CSI work. Not really,
Right.
but kind of.
Well, I got my fingers crossed, mate.
Yeah, it sounds neat. And it may seem like something like, why would you do that? I realized I'd want to do something like that when Amazon released their free game program, and I read the end user license agreement, and Amazon has these back end servers that you can hook into to handle Twitch integration to let people from your chat like play with you. And there's a clause in there that says that anybody using Amazon servers can't use it to run military or hospital equipment unless there's a zombie apocalypse, and then it's free game.
It actually states zombie apocalypse.
Yes, it says in the case of a zombie apocalypse, this clause is null and void. You may proceed to run the last remnants of the military and healthcare computers and systems on Amazon servers.
That's fantastic.
It is. It's great.
So the moment
there's actually a lot of little things hidden like that if you read some of the user agreements.
Yeah, so I'm one of those weird people that reads stuff like that. So I don't mind reading law books and whatnot. And somebody has to read the state constitution here at some point. Specifically ours. My state's is longer than the Bible.
Yeah, politics gets a little out of control at times.
But I think it'll be fun. That's what I did. I'm hoping to hear back. If not, I'm going to just go for a position at a news station. Maybe be a cameraman. I don't know. We'll see. But that's what I've been doing. So
I hope it works out for you. Really
me
do.
too. No, I hope it doesn't. So, Veet, you had the
Yes.
topic this week. What are we talking about?
Okay, so this week's a little different than what we've done in the first three, in that it's not a popular culture in our lifetime item that has been created. The topic this week is the Hobbit novel, and the novel itself is 69 years old. Came out in 1937. It's relevant because it has hugely influenced a good chunk of what us nerds enjoy and appreciate on a day-to-day basis.
I mean, are you sure? I mean, defining modern fantasy as we still know it, are you sure that's a big enough of an influence?
I think it is. Yeah, just a bit. But half of what I'm going to talk about today is a very personal story, and it starts back in 6th grade for me. In 6th grade, we had a teacher called Mr. Griffiths. And Mr. Griffiths was a relatively stern, short, stocky, but stern teacher, but we all adored him. And he did one thing at the end of most days in class. At the last half hour of the day, he would stop teaching. He'd invite us to sprawl ourselves in the classroom, and most of us would just throw ourselves on the carpet, lay out, and he would read to us. Okay? He'd spend the last half hour of the day reading from a book. And he started off with Charlie in the Chocolate Factory and Charlie in the Great Glass Elevator, and they were great. I loved them. Okay? And I got caught up in the stories, and I just enjoyed the experience of being read to. After he finished those books, he pulled out The Hobbit, and he starts reading The Hobbit to us. Well, this just blew my mind. I was 11 or 12, and this was just like something I'd never heard of before, because The Hobbit recreated a brand new planet, a brand new world. This wasn't this wasn't our world, our life with great imaginations. You know, everyday people come across a witch or a fairy, or, you know, strange things happen in a chocolate factory and all this magic appears to everyday people. This is something completely new, a completely new universe. And in this universe, there's dwarves and elves and orcs and goblins. Yes, there's humans, but humans had their day. They're no longer the defining factor on this planet, on this universe. They are a part, but not a significant part. And in it is this hobbit. And the hobbits are just these little, almost forgotten people. They just sort of go about their day in their little villages, and they sort of, they farm and they fish and they market and grow stuff. And just listening to him read the story, and you have to understand that when Tolkien wrote this book, his intention was to write a children's book. And he wrote it in a very narrative perspective. So he's explaining it to you as he's going along, but he doesn't treat the children as idiots. He explains something, but in the same tone, he's saying, but you already know this, don't you? To us, the listeners, right? The readers. So he's explaining about dwarves and elves and their abilities and their strengths and so forth. And he says it in such a tone it says, but you know this. I'm telling you this, but you, the reader, know this, understand this. And I've often think back to this point in my schooling life, particularly my primary school or elementary school days. And this was like quite a pivotal moment, a seminal moment that really got my mind it just exploded in imagination. Okay, it just allowed me to think of all sorts of possibilities that can be created. And there has been tons and tons of research done out there, and school teachers and parents will tell you that reading to your children is great, not only for just imagination, but for improving intelligence, for improving the love of reading, the love of books, the love of education, just from this simple task of reading out aloud to your children. And that, like I said, just having him do this. And that's not to say that teachers before him didn't read to us, but it was just something about the books he chose that really influenced or had an impact on me specifically, and in particular The Hobbit. So then I go about my life. I become a nurse. I get married. My wife turns around to me and she says, "Oh, by the way, I'm pregnant. We're going to have a child." And my brain explodes, as I'm sure most men out there who find out they're going to be a father for the first time, their brain just goes, what does this mean? Right? And it's a shock, and you come to terms with it, and you start making plans, and you've got an idea of where you hope and what you can do as a parent. And the first thing I said to myself was, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start collecting a bunch of books, children's books that I want to read. And we knew it was we found out the sex of our baby, so we knew it was a girl. books I want to read to Samantha when she's here with us. So I got myself hands on a 50th anniversary edition of The Hobbit. I made sure that was in my hand. I went out and bought probably 20, maybe not that many, somewhere between 10 and 15 Dr. Seuss books. And anytime I went near a bookstore, I would see what was on special or what was sort of, the latest thing, the Hungry Caterpillar and all these sorts of books that I enjoyed as a kid. And I collected these books. Sam came along. First opportunity I had, I started reading to my daughter. And she loved it, right? And it's in two parts. It's a real bonding experience you have with your child when you sit there and you sit together and you open a book and you read through it with them. But you also see their brain ticking over and you see their brain soaking all this in, all this information, all this imagination. And it was almost palpable. I could see my daughter's intelligence improving almost day by day by just sitting down and reading to my daughter. Now, most parents will know what I'm talking about here, because you'll reach a point when you're reading to your children where they just want the same book read to them, right? So you go, oh, what are we going to read tonight? And they come up to you with Pajama Time, which you just read for the past 20 days straight, but they want it for a 21st. So you read Pajama again for the 21st time, and then the 22nd time, and the 23rd time. So there's something there that they grab onto. There's some imagination and something that they want to relive day by day and enjoy.
So what you're also saying is that there were toys and sci-fi and fantasy in her life as a child.
Yes, if you sat down with my daughter and you looked at her interests, sci-fi, fantasy, they do have a bit of a dark edge, and I think I'm a bit responsible for that too, and we may discuss that on a different day. She's into superheroes and all those sorts of things, and I played a part in that. I'm not going to take complete credit for it, but I feel I played a part in that. My daughter's very artistic, and I'd like to think that I played a part in creating that, in harnessing that imagination and that intelligence.
Oh man, you're going to get totally blasted for your heartfelt speech about your daughter. She's going to be like,
well,
Dad.
Yeah, exactly. She's going to take all the credit and give me none of it. I'll claim some. I'm not going to take all of it, but I'll claim some of it.
That's awesome.
I have one regret.
Oh no.
Because she developed a love of books, and she soaked books up that by the age of 6 or 7, she discovered Harry Potter and she started reading Harry Potter. And that just blew Claire and I's mind, at the ability for her to pick up a sizable book and read through it. There's probably about 20% of it there that she didn't understand, but she didn't care. She just had a love of this book, of this world, this creation of Harry and his friends, and this book revealed it to her, and she'd finish the book and she'd start again from the beginning and she'd read it again. And that was great. It's what we wanted. We wanted a bright young lady who had a love of books, a love of imagination, genuine intelligence, and she just devoured anything Harry Potter. She just devoured. I made the mistake, so she's about 6, 7, 8. I made the mistake of getting the Hobbit book off the shelf and handing it to her and saying, "You'll like this book, read it." And I should have. I know I look back and I think back and I go, why did I just hand it to her and not sit down and read it to her like I always wanted? And as parents, we can get caught up with everything else going on, with how busy we are at work, all the responsibilities we have at home, what little free time we have. And the thought that never came to my head that I should find half an hour at night each night and read this book to my daughter just to share the experience that I had as a child as well. So I have a regret. And she took the book and she put it down and she didn't read it. She eventually got to it and she loves it. And she's a big fan of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings now. It's a little regret I have. It sort of like sits there whenever I think back of the great experience I had as a child and then maybe a little faux pas that I had along the way.
Well, you mentioned you mentioned just handing it to her. I don't think that. I think that actually gives you more credibility. It doesn't detract from it, because think about it this way. For you to hand that to her, okay, so you cite The Hobbit as the seminal thing, and it encaptured your imagination. Well, you have to look at it from this perspective. At that time, you had enough respect for her that you understood that her imagination was already captured by reading. So what you were trying to create, you had already done for her earlier.
That's what I took from it.
You had already set out to do what you wanted to with The Hobbit without needing The Hobbit. And that says more towards your parenting skills than just the book itself.
True. Yeah, you're not wrong. And she was ready for it. I handed her the book probably 7, 8, and she was ready for it. It's it's all good.
Because I came to The Hobbit the same way. See, when I grew up, I was a golden rule child. So there were these little books, and they all had the same spine, golden rule. And it was all things like The Pokey Little Puppy, Peter Rabbit.
Yes. Yep. Love those.
Kittens in Mittens, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
I devoured those books as a kid as well. Yep.
So I had to come at The Hobbit on my own, because I didn't have anybody that, my mom tried to read to me at a young age. I had tons of books, but she didn't really have the education to read to me all the time. So she just basically made sure I was surrounded with books, and I was a golden rule person, and I came at The Hobbit on my own terms, when I was much older. And I was on the opposite end. I read The Hobbit. I could not pick up Harry Potter. So people would give it to me, Harry Potter, here, we got you Harry Potter for your birthday. And I was like, I'm going to go read Lord of the Rings or Raymond Feist or Orson Scott Card.
This isn't heavy enough for me.
Yep, well, kind of, yeah, in a way. But, I think it's interesting that how people encounter The Hobbit, because they're really the only people pushing The Hobbit are the fans, really. It's not like, it wasn't a required reading for me when I came to school. I know my dad said it was required reading for him, and he was like, I didn't read it.
Right. Oh, because he was told to read it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're right. It's not a book when you walk past the bookstore, it's not there on the new releases or your top sellers.
It is now. Right. That movie just came out.
Well, yes. Yeah, sort of. Yeah. But it's there. Those books are there to promote the movie, I feel.
Yeah, they are.
As opposed to, here's a great read, And you're right. The Hobbit is a book now, and probably was back then too when I was a kid, the only way you came across it was somebody who had a passion for the book to say, this is a great book, you should read it. So you're probably right. Robert, when did you first come across The Hobbit? The book, that is.
My dad used to read Lord of the Rings every year.
Nice.
Repeatedly. He's obsessive about it. And I read The Hobbit in anticipation of the Fellowship of the Ring film.
Right.
Because I was like, well, I should read this before it becomes a movie. So I read The Hobbit, and I loved it to death. It was just a lot of fun. It was a little simple for me, but it also was just, good, honest fun. It wasn't full of, dark, terrible themes or curse words or anything of that sort. It was good times. I mean, I understood that, there was a dark undertone, especially where Gollum and the Ring was concerned. But it's not presented that way.
Exactly.
It's not dark or crazy or evil or, not morally gray or anything of that sort. I had a lot of fun with it. And something I think I'll get a little bit more into later if we go further with it is after that book, I found that I really didn't like Lord of the Rings as a novel. So,
yeah. And I do want to talk about Lord of the Rings here in a little bit. So just to finish up on this sort of being read to part of the story is it also led me to I came across and appreciate audiobooks, because audiobooks is the next best thing, in my opinion. If there's not that somebody there to read that to you, audiobooks, if it's read by the right person, right? If you have a great narrator, a great reader, an audiobook is a wonderful thing. And I'll give you an example. I don't know if you guys have come across this, but my family and I discovered the Harry Potter audiobooks. Now, everything Harry Potter out there, the original written books, the movies that were made, and the audiobooks, for me, the greatest experience or Harry Potter experience I have had is listening to all those books on audiobook. It's read by the one person, a gentleman by the name of Jim Dale. Jim Dale was basically a 2-bit television comedian in the UK in the 70s. He was a character. He played a character on this, what I thought was absolute silly sitcom called On the Buses. It was very typical of British humour on television in the 70s. That's this show. He turns up as the narrator, as the storyteller in these books, and he does a wonderful job. He creates all 174 voices. These audiobooks are written, are recorded before even the movies are made. And I'm quite certain that when they picked the actors to play in the movies, they turned to the audiobooks and said, this is what we want you to try and capture. Because he did such a good job of voicing these people. And every time I think back to the Harry Potter and how much I enjoy the audiobooks, I inevitably think back to my experience as a child being read to by Mr. Griffiths. So that's my secondary recommendation. First recommendation is read The Hobbit. Second recommendation is get the Harry Potter audiobooks. There you go. If you're only haven't quite finished reading the Hobbit novel, you can pause the show right here and then you finish the book and come back. We'll still be here. We'll still be here. So, okay, you're back. You're back from reading the novel. Great. Well, continue. So the second part of my discussion for today is basically the world of fantasy that J.R.R. Tolkien created. Okay. And in my opinion, and people will have different opinions, he's basically the grandfather of fantasy. And if you think about all the books that followed, all the movies that have followed, the video games that we've played, a significant amount of that imagination, that creation, that world of fantasy owes itself to the world that Tolkien created, firstly in The Hobbit and then in The Lord of the Rings. So he wrote this book in 1937. It was a children's book. Like I said earlier, it is written, and Robert said it is on a bit on the simple side. It still has darkish themes, not themes, but references.
Undertones.
Undertones. There's darkish undertones. Yes, with the ring and Gollum, he's not afraid to mention that a goblin's had his head clean chopped off, that sort of thing. Not exactly the same, not exactly the thing you would expect in children's books, but if we're realistic with a lot of children's books, a lot of them aren't all that, sunshine and rainbows. There's a lot of sort of blood and gore and darkish undertones in a lot of children's books. And in this case, this was no different.
Yeah, the general tone. See, it's great. You can tell he wrote it for kids, and because it kind of, it is, in a way, the hobbits are representative of children. They have that innocence about them. And that's, Tolkien's telling this story where it's these innocent people in a world of wonder where they don't have to worry about anything, but then it hints at a bigger world of more serious things going on. And it's basically letting children, know that you in a bigger world. If you're a young kid and your mom and your dad's in the kitchen and they're talking low about how dad's like not getting paid that much, or hey, they cut back on work. As a child, you overhear that and you feel those darker undertones of reality. And that's kind of what I think he was trying to get at, to let children know they can celebrate their innocence and the idea of an adventure. But, in any world, no matter where you are, there are dangerous things.
Right, absolutely. And you're right in saying that the Hobbit are the children and there's a bigger world out there. A huge, and for the hobbits, there's only this bigger world is just whisperings and stories and tales. Very few of them have actually experienced it.
They're crazy to leave the Shire.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
We're safe here. Why would you go anywhere else?
Exactly. And then, Bilbo Baggins can't help himself but get drawn along on this adventure. As much as he wants to, he keeps thinking back about the comforts of home and, the easiness of getting a meal and so forth. He just can't help himself but just get drawn and more and further into this adventure. So that's 1937. So from 1937 to 1949, so about a 12-year process, Tolkien then creates The Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings is a 3-book story.
Wasn't meant to be.
No, the original release was one big tome.
Yep.
And then got divided up into subsequently 3 books, and then each one got subdivided again into book 1 and book 2 of each subsequent book.
Yeah, he spent his whole life basically fighting editors for that book, or because of that book.
So he obviously created this world, and now he wants to take it further. So I had the Hobbit read to me. My teacher goes on to explain that there's the Lord of the Rings follows on from this. he sort of hints that we might be a little bit too young to try and make sense of it. But I didn't care because I ran off to the library. I asked the librarian to point me to where the Lord of the Rings were, and she showed me where they were, and there was 3 fat books sitting on the shelf, and I just went, nah. Nah, I can't do that.
As big as I am.
They were just too big. They were just too big. So I left it alone. I think when I was maybe about 16 or 17, I sort of thought back and go, you know what? I should read Lord of the Rings. I got them out of the library, and they are a tough read. They're written in a much different style. So obviously now he has created this world, this imagination, and he wants to bring it to full life in full detail, telling the lore, the backstory. He just doesn't want to tell the story of another adventure. He wants to give it everything.
Yeah. So
this go on.
I was going to say the difference between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings is The Hobbit is a folk tale. Lord of the Rings is mythology.
Yes. Yep.
And that actually is interesting that you say that, because where this is about how this, these topics inform and shape you, as we developed. Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit actually made me very aware of something as far as fantasy world building and storytelling goes. I like to fashion myself as a nascent storyteller, if you will, and artist and whatnot. And I've been working on my own little crazy fantasy world for far longer than Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings, although he probably worked on his world much, 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 much longer. So, so long as
they're still discovering things.
Right. So long as I don't get to the 30-year point, I think I'm good. But anyways, the thing I noticed between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and I really took this to heart. In The Hobbit, he's telling a story that takes place in a world. The world serves the purposes of the story. In Lord of the Rings, part of the reason why I frankly don't really like those books, and I find them to be an incredibly difficult read, despite the fact that I like the story. I like the story a lot.
Yeah.
And it's because those books, the story serves the world. The story is a platform through which he describes the world of Middle-earth. Middle-earth does not exist to tell the story of the One Ring. He's got it backwards from my point of view. It's really frustrating to have the Fellowship get together and they go on their journey and they spend page after page and chapter after chapter going, hey, look, to our left, it's the ruins of such and such. It was because of this that all these things happened, and It's really, really important. And I know a song about it, and I'm going to sing the song for a page and a half. And we're going to do all these things, and we're going to talk about that. And look, to our right, there's this thing over here, and it's like from 2,000 years ago, and it was really important back when the Silmarillion was a thing, and half the continent fell into the ocean because there was a big, big war, and all this stuff. I'm just like, dude, I don't care. Have something happen. And then it's like, they set up camp, and they get attacked by wolves. And the attack by wolves is one paragraph long. And then they start walking, and they're like, and to our left are the ruins of such and such. I'm like, damn it, man.
Yeah. and that I found that exactly what you said. So I tried reading these books again at 16. I got halfway through Two Towers, and I just put it down, and I said, I just can't do this.
I never got through the Fellowship.
Oh, man.
I could, as much as I wanted. I then picked up, there was another anniversary collection series in sale in the store, and I bought that. And I made myself read it from beginning to end. And you're right. There's a lot of world building in this. And I so much just wanted the story that's the way I read it. So when I saw that he was sort of drifting away from the story, I'd skip a paragraph or 2 paragraphs just to get back to the story, because I love the story. The story's a great story.
Story fantastic.
Yeah.
So So, okay, you ready? Prepare yourselves.
Yep.
Dust the
Go on.
Cheetos off your chest. Loved The Lord of the Rings because of the things that you guys don't like. I
Those
love.
things are fine.
Well, no,
those
no,
things
no.
are fine, but he gets too sidetracked, is my saying. But I know what you're saying.
I love Middle Earth. Like, absolutely. Its hills and valleys are the contours of a loved one to me. I fell in love with that world because I could see why he was trying to do this. Like, the aim of the story is that it's the loss of an age. I mean, literally talks about it, but
Oh yeah,
you're losing everything, pretty much. Middle Earth is going away, and it's old, and there's more forgotten about it than anyone knows. So I love learning about things like the Etten Moors or Goldolgur or like all of that stuff, because I can see how impassionate he was about this idea of loss, of forgetting, of losing history. Because, you know, how much mythology and stuff has been lost in the real world, where we never think about, you know, Roman history or anything like that. We
Man,
tend
we have no idea what we lost in the Library of Alexandria when that crap burned down.
Exactly.
True,
So
true.
I can understand how someone could look at our world and craft a story about trying to convince you just how tragic it is when the culture of a people or their effects or the roles they've played in the past are absolutely just forgotten forever. You just can't recover them. They're destroyed by armies that just want to see everything burn. And I fell in love with that. I'm a person who is very romanticized by that idea.
Well, I was going to say, for me, another real world equivalent of like losing something, and this is really out there, but in World War II, the Allies bombed Germany repeatedly over and over and over. And at one point, we bombed the museum that held the only fully intact skeleton and example of Spinosaurus aegypticus. Damn!
So in our real world, the example of this would be ISIS destroyed an ancient city that was at one time, it was a part of almost every ancient culture. Persian, Egyptian, it didn't matter. And there is history there that will never reappear on this planet. So I understand the romantic idea of preserving what to anyone else would seem like buildings or texts or statues. But I feel that loss. It's a place I'll never see, I'll never go to, but it's gone. It's like when those people drove those trucks over the Inca lines or the Nazca drawings, and they messed up these gigantic pieces of artwork that were designed to be seen from space.
Thanks, Greenpeace.
Oh yeah, that was Greenpeace, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Jerk bags. So I can be completely caught up in this idea of what he was trying to do. I do understand that those people are just moving through those places so he can talk about them. It's like a Hollywood bus tour. It's like we're going down the street. If you look on your left, that's where Mel Gibson shouted racial slurs.
That's basically what the book is. So.
But yeah, I came into The Hobbit and it completely captured me. I love the world, but I understand what you're talking about, how the story kind of meanders because he's wanting to talk about the world, but how do you create a book and just talk about a world? At that point, you'd just be writing history books.
I just read a history book about a fantasy world.
Yep.
Just saying, it's doable.
World of Warcraft Chronicles. It's amazing. You can't buy it because it's sold out.
You can get on the Blizzard store. It's the only place, though.
So going back to Lord of the Rings, you're right. I love the creation of Middle Earth. I love what he was. I appreciate what he was trying to do in creating this, but it was distracting, and I think it made it a difficult read.
Well, that's what I meant. But
Yeah.
like it, it really, I couldn't get over it. Like, I don't mind learning all these things. Tell me these things. I want to know, but don't do it at the expense of your story. And I feel that that's what he did.
Yeah, I agree. So, like I mentioned earlier, in my my humble opinion, The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings is basically the grandfather to the world of fantasy that we appreciate as nerds today in all sorts of forms. Let me ask you guys, where do you put it? Its significance.
I think it is, as you said, the father of all modern fantasy, and it's also, I think, the limiter of a lot of imagination.
Yep.
As far as fantasy goes. And I don't mean this to sound negative, but it kind of has to be a negative, because I don't believe fantasy has rules. Fantasy is fantasy. You can create any type of fantasy world you want. And like I said, I'm kind of a storyteller, and I remember there was a conversation, and I was having with a guy in college. We were talking about stories that we were telling, and I was describing this fantasy story that I've been concocting, and I'm still working on and drawing pictures for, and whatever. But I was explaining this stuff to him, and he thought it sounded really cool and all that. And then he asks me, "So what role do the elves have in your story?" And I was like, "There are no elves." And he goes, "Well, then it's not fantasy." And I was like, whoa, what a... I mean, yeah, this conversation took a very southern turn at that point. Because, I mean, that's ridiculous. How does it, not be fantasy just because there aren't elves and dwarves in it? I mean, I have demons from other dimensions attacking, humans. How is that not a fantasy story? Just because there's not elves in it? This is bizarre. And... I mean, it would be like saying the Magic the Gathering set in Innistrad isn't fantasy because there's no elves in it and just werewolves and humans and zombies. I mean, that's bizarre.
Robert's absolutely right. This book didn't create boundaries. It gave people the permission to think and imagine what the hell they like and say, this is what my world looks like.
It's the chunky salsa of fantasy. No one knew they wanted it until they had it.
That's true.
So, because, I mean, you have to look at a lot of the groundwork he did was he was transmorphing European mythology in the same way, like you can follow his linguistic roots. So language itself is the transformation, English is a transformation of things like Germanic roots. Yes. You can see him doing that. He's transforming the language of mythology. So he's taking Scandinavian things, sprites and elves that were little tricksters that would flit in the corner of your eye, and he's going, no, these are beautiful ancient people who have fought timeless wars against evil that corrupts them, and they have names and kingdoms. Whereas before it was like, where are my car keys? Damn elf.
Yeah, exactly.
They were stealing your socks in the dryer, not, waging war on forgotten continents.
Yep.
Well, he and C.S. Lewis together both really believed that they were crafting the mythology of, England to an extent,
Mm-hmm. The new Albion. I can see it. But yeah, I love that if you know that he's a linguist, you can see him taking that language and, transforming it into the new words of mythology. And I do agree that it has limited stuff because people writing fantasy after Tolkien is like composing music after Beethoven and Mozart. If you were around during the time, people would just go, yeah, it's all right. It's not Beethoven.
Yeah.
So,
or may not even be thinking that. They may have thought this is a little sort of different and a little strange and not what we're used to.
Yeah, he really did create the language of how you write fantasy. Basically, writing the rules for how it works. And
there's no rules.
Exactly. That's what people don't understand. It's like, oh, is this some kind of dark psychological literature? I bet it's going to reference H.P. Lovecraft. Oh, yep, it does.
Yeah, I enjoy Lovecraftian horror. One of my favorite games ever is called Eternal Darkness, and it's all about, ancient old god things. Some of my favorite villains in World of Warcraft are the Lovecraftian old gods. I'm totally into that. But it seems like people can't think of something better to do or something different. They just keep repeating it because they're like, well, people like that. Let's do it again.
Yep, it's considered the best. Might as well copy the best.
And people have copied Tolkien,
Yeah, I mean, the what is it called? Stephen King wrote the Dark Tower series, and he wrote the Dark Tower series after reading Lord of the Rings, and he said, I had to wait a while to write it, or I would have just copied Tolkien.
Yeah. Speaking of Stephen King, and how I was saying earlier how much I love audiobooks, don't get anything that's read by Stephen King.
Hi, you guys. You like
It
novels?
is horrible. It is terrible. He has the worst speaking voice. It is not good. So
They all float down here, guys.
If you want a Stephen King audiobook, just see who's narrating it, and just don't get anything that's being narrated by Stephen King.
So here's what you do. You get a Stephen King novel narrated by Neil Gaiman.
Yeah, there you go.
That guy is so awesome.
There you go. See? There you go. Stephen, if you're listening, which I know you are because you love us, get Neil, get Mr. Gaiman on it. He's a great narrator.
So now going to talk about the movies. And I sort of hesitate going there, not because I don't want to talk about it. My focus for this topic was and always is the book.
Yeah.
But we can't talk about the book today without referring to the movies.
We could, but it would seem silly.
Yeah, it would. So in 2001, 2003, which is when the Lord of the Rings movies were released. So before then, a relatively unknown, obscure New Zealand director by the name of Peter Jackson.
Thank you, Sam Raimi.
Threw his hat into the ring and said, I want to make the Lord of the Rings movies. And the Lord of the Rings movies work because he's telling the story. He gets to tell the story. So, yes, he world builds. Yes, we do have a bit of sort of a lore along the way, but it is basically telling the story of beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah, but I mean...
And it works.
A lot of that is fixed by the fact that instead of having, 4 pages describing the landscape, you just do a sweeping aerial shot from a helicopter of New Zealand soil. And it's like, yep, there you go.
No, it's because he removes Tom Bombadil.
Hey, you shut up.
He serves no purpose.
Tom Bombadil is, I don't know.
He has been excised for the greater good.
I don't understand. He's some kind of doll his children owned or something, and he brought it to life in the book for reasons and basically made him some kind of godlike figure. I never understood Tom Bombadil.
He's a demigod who is able to look at the ring and not be corrupted by its influence.
He's
so
powerful that the things happening in the world do not concern him.
And he lives in the Shire. I'm just so glad it was excised because it's pointless.
He sings.
Pointless.
I mean, the thing about Tom Bombadil, he's awesome if you play Lord of the Rings online and you go into the Barrow Downs and you are losing to the Lord of the Barrows and Tom Bombadil busts in and he sings Dead Men to Sleep with a voice that causes the whole place to cave in. That was awesome. All right, back to the movies. So the movies, because we would be here all night if I talked about the game, because I love the game. Well, I don't love it anymore. I don't think they care that much anymore. Turbine. Cash shop. So the movies do cover a lot of what was missing in the book, like you said, because, with the visual media, you don't have to describe it. You just do sweeping shots or show it. You don't have to tell people about it.
And in a way, the restrictive medium that is film serves these books better.
It tightens it up.
It tightens it up. Yeah, absolutely. You're right. You can tell a lot by, like you said, a sweeping shot or a picture of some runes and that sort of thing. I loved the Lord of the Rings movies. Just devoured these things up. I even bought the extended version DVDs. Yep. So it's like each one of those films has an average of 40 minutes of film added to each.
That's also including the 8 hours of extras on 6 DVDs.
Yes.
And I've watched them all.
Yeah. And you just know that if they were making the films today, they would have made 2 movies per book. They would have made it a 6-movie series.
That makes me kind of sad.
It does a bit because that's what they do now. For good or for bad, that's what they do now. They take a book and go, right, we're going to make 2 movies out of this book.
The last book in the series will always be a 2-parter.
Yeah. Well,
unless
I think now... we'll discuss that in a sec. I honestly think now, if somebody came out and said, I'm going to make Lord of the Rings, they'd say, right, we're going to make 2 films per book. Well, and there's enough content to do that with the Lord of the Rings.
Well, you also have to realize this wasn't the first time they did a movie of Lord of the Rings.
Nope.
No, it wasn't.
There was the Warner Brothers animated movies.
Yes.
Where there's a whip, there's a way.
which I haven't seen. People have constantly referred them to me, but I, for some reason, have never got around to seeing them.
They are a
Bilbo
product
of the 9 fingers and the Ring of Doom.
They are a product of the times. Exactly. You know how we saw the song in the beginning, and you're like, man, that's the most 60s thing I've ever seen. Like, you will hear that at the beginning of this episode. You can tell they are a product of their time.
Another reason why I think the Lord of the Rings work is because Peter Jackson was allowed to make the movies exactly how he wanted them. Be able to tell the parts of the story he wanted. He could chop and change the story around to make it fit a little better. But basically, him and his production team basically made all the decisions. I'm quite certain that the Warner Brothers and whoever else throwing money towards this thing had no expectation of it. Nothing like the expectation for when they decide they're going to make the Hobbit movies, right? Because when they go around to making the Hobbit movies, they know this thing works. This story, this type of story, this type of fantasy, we have the technology, we can make it work, and we can make $1 billion out of it. I don't think there was that expectation, not at least until the first movie hit, that this was going to be popular and it was going to make $1 billion.
Yeah,
well, the real hero of that story really is the production company New Line Cinema, because they went all in.
Yes, they did. Yep, they did.
And Lord of the Rings is an example of taking a property and making a proper blockbuster out of it, paying it all the respect, all the resources it needs, and it makes it so that Blockbuster isn't the curse, say, that it is kind of most of the time when you are talking about franchises, such as the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles blockbuster. I'm not happy about that.
Right.
Whereas with Lord of the Rings, I love those movies as much as I love the book.
You see, I would, I love them in this circumstance. I love the movies more than I enjoyed the experience of sitting there and reading through the books. Absolutely.
Hobbit's a different situation.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Agreed. So, yes. So now it's almost 9 years later. They announced they're going to make the Hobbit movie. Peter Jackson isn't the first person they go to.
Well, technically, it was taken away from him first.
Yes,
it's a long, convoluted legal battle.
Yes.
Who do they
And
think about giving it to?
Guillermo del Toro, which would have been
Oh
fantastic.
yeah.
and he's actually credited in the movies.
Yeah, he did a lot of creative production work on it.
Right. So obviously now the movie company sees that he has an opportunity to make a blockbuster movie, bring in heaps of money, but all they've got to work with is The Hobbit. The Hobbit's only a 200-page or thereabouts book, children's book.
Yep. And boy, oh boy, does it show.
Well, you know, I try and avoid being one of these people that says, "Oh, the book was better than the movie," or the movie didn't do any justice to the book. I understand that they're different mediums, and therefore you achieve different things in the different mediums. So when I go see a movie of a book that I've read, I set my expectations differently. Because you only have 2 hours to tell a story. And with a book, you can write pages and pages and pages, and nobody tells you to stop. Right? When they announced The Hobbit and said it was going to be a 2-movie production, I accepted it. I sort of understood that's what the movie companies are doing at the moment. That's how they try and extend their money-making opportunity. Now we get a book and we make 2 movies out of it.
Yeah, but in the case of The Hobbit, when it was going to be 2 movies, that actually made a lot of sense to me because there is a lot of stuff in The Hobbit that is just completely glossed over. Like the Battle of the 5 Armies in the book is, and then Bilbo got his head knocked out and he woke up later and the battle was over. And it's like,
yes,
well, yeah, okay, great. And, you could easily craft, a 30 or 40-minute action sequence out of the events that are said to have happened during the Battle of the 5 Armies.
Yep,
it made sense. Yeah, it made sense to me that they would do 2 movies because you could just be more honest.
Yes.
Was how I looked at it. And it's when they decide to break it into 3 movies because money that it becomes a problem because now they have to start padding it. And you have the exact opposite problem of Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings was excising the fluff to give you a lean story because there's a lot of story in Lord of the Rings, but there was a hell of a lot more book. So it was just better to cut things down. Here, they're like, well, oh, man, we need to start adding things. Now, to their credit, a lot of what they actually added was canonical and from the appendices, things that occurred that were not shown, like a lot of Gandalf's journeys, things of that nature. That was cool. I liked seeing that stuff. But there was a lot of things that they just embellished so much, like Smog getting punked in his... Well, yeah, but Smog getting punked in his own home by the dwarves was really hard to take. We have to end on an action sequence.
Yes. Yeah. And you're right. There's stuff that they can expand upon. Did they really have to add Legolas? Did they really have to add Legolas? Right.
Technically, that is where he lives.
He that is where he's
from. You don't have to show him.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I understand, like, if there's one thing The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings is really lacking, and that is, not just strong female characters full stop. There
are none in The Hobbit.
None in The Hobbit, and 2 in Lord of the Rings, right?
And they have bit parts.
Yeah, exactly. So I get it. You're making a movie in 2013. You're making a big production. Let's include a strong female character. No, they added Toriel. I have no problem with that. But did they have to add a love interest? Did they have to create a love triangle? Couldn't she just be a badass elf, an orc hunter? She gets out there, shoots few in the head, leads the way, that sort of thing. Did she have to be there so we could have a love triangle? Or as my daughter puts it, a love chevron?
Still a better story than Twilight.
So yeah, I don't understand. I don't know why they did that either. It's like, yeah, let's put a female character, but then she has emotions, and those emotions, they get in the way sometimes. It's just patronizing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, this is dumb.
And that was the only way they could write Legolas into the story? Come on, really? If that's what you wanted to do, if that's the callback you wanted, if that's the draw card you wanted, that's the way you had to do it? Okay, fair enough. They didn't have to make 3 movies.
No.
It does. See, so I sat down and watched the first movie of The Hobbit last night. And that, to me, out of the 3, is the most complete. It's true to the book. It follows the journey along the way. Yes, it's embellished. Yes, they chop and change things a little bit. But it achieves what it's supposed to achieve. And that's basically the journey to the mountain.
And the crazy thing is that this is hilarious. So over the course of 3 movies, they have 13 dwarves. At the end of that 3rd movie, I'm still going, oh, that dwarf, he's the one with the hat. There's the fat one, and there's the one played by a male model.
Which is still 900 million thousand times % more characterization than they have in the book.
True. That's true. Yes, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, but they created these, archetypal characters. But even at the end, I didn't know anything about them.
But Robert's right. There's not a lot about them in the book, but I do feel, after reading the book, I at least felt I knew them by name. In the movie, I knew them by character. Like you said, there's the fat one, there's the long-haired one, there's the male model, that sort of thing. But
Thorin Oakenshield is the only one that matters.
Look, the best thing for me that came out of the Hobbit movies, and like I said, I watched the first one. I enjoyed the first one again. I think they could have got away with a good all-round second movie, and that could have been the package to good movies. They didn't need a third. But the best thing that came out of the Hobbit movie is because of this popularity, the set that was created for Hobbiton here in New Zealand has been created and has been rebuilt and established as a tourist attraction. So this last summer, so about a couple months ago, my wife and daughter and we went off to a little holiday at the beach, and where we were staying was about an hour away from Hobbiton. So we paid our little monies and we went wandering through Hobbiton, and they have done a beautiful job of recreating Hobbiton. And then when I watched the movie last night, it was there in all its glory, and I'm going, yep, I walked that path and I walked through that door and I looked down the hill at the Green Dragon. It was really nice. It was just a really nice experience to have on the day when we walked through the set, and then last night to reconnect to it and seeing it in the movie. It was just a nice experience.
You suck, by the way.
And it really is. It's like they probably, I don't know, they probably put through a couple hundred people a day through that movie set, just round and round, and people from all over the world. And it literally is in the middle of nowhere. It is the back blocks of a farmer. Because when they looked for this, they basically flew around in an aircraft looking for ideal spots to set up to recreate Hobbiton. They found these back blocks of this big farm, sheep farm in New Zealand. They had to go up to the farmer, explain what it was they wanted. Could they lease the land for an X amount of time? And it wasn't until basically they started building it again for The Hobbit that they said this time, because when it was originally made, it wasn't made for longevity. It was made to last long enough for the shoot, and then it was going to get all torn down or just sort of laid to waste.
Yeah, and everyone thought that was a shame afterwards.
Right, and because there were literally people driving around the countryside going, is it over there? Is it we're trying to locate where Hobbiton was? So when they decided they were going to make The Hobbit, this time round they were given the instruction that they had to build it more permanently. So the materials they used would last the test of time. And so then they were able to turn it into a tourist attraction.
It's really cool. I want to get there.
I'll have to visit one day.
Yeah, it was that. So you can drive down to Hobbiton and then just drive a bit further down the road and go see the Thunderbirds, the models they use for the sets there. There you go. That's your New Zealand trip, all planned out, worked out.
I just want to go to Weta so that I can steal one of the swords that they've made for the Warcraft movie.
They've got, if you go, when you fly into the airports, they've got dwarf statues made. And
I know.
The little plaques at the bottom it says donated from Middle Earth.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is.
I really want to go to Wellington. I have to see Weta. I love that company. They always have a display at the San Diego Comic Con, and I'm always like, the statues are amazing. Kind of like that full size Grom Hellscream statue that you guys have seen that Weta made for the Warcraft film. I've seen it. I've stood next to it. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
what I'll do is on the Facebook I'll throw up a picture that we took while we are in Hobbiton.
So everyone can be jealous.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, I'll do that.
So the takeaway from today's episode is The Hobbit is good. The movies, not so good. Well, they're all right.
They're okay.
See, when you started talking about the Lord of the Rings movies, I got really excited, and the first thing I thought was, I want to go watch those right now. I want to go watch them again.
Yeah.
But when you mentioned The Hobbit, I was like,
Watch the first one again, like I did last night, and you will like it.
I'll have to get to it.
But
I have trouble with the finale being throw pine cones at the enemy.
Look, the biggest problem you have with the Harry Potter series and the Lord of the Rings and any of these stories that have a wizard in it, somebody of great magical power and strength, is that can fix the problem about 5 minutes into the story, right?
A wizard,
because well, from the point of view that towards the end of the first Hobbit book, they're in peril. They're about to fall off a cliff. Gandalf sends for help. The giant eagles arrive, collect them all up, and fly them to safety. Well, when the dwarves decided they need to go on a journey to get to the Lonely Mountain, couldn't they just ask Gandalf to organize a bit of a lift from his giant eagles, and they could have picked them up in Hobbiton and flew them to the foot of the Lonely Mountain, and there, done. We didn't have to go through all the palaver in between time. I know it doesn't make for much of a movie.
Well, it doesn't really work that way. It'd be like, and a real world example would be like, well, we're allies with this country. Can't they just take us to where we want to go? Why don't they just come and pick us up so we don't have to travel? It's like they would go, no, we don't. We're not going to spend our resources helping you out unless it's in a time of need.
Yeah, but I think when you're going to drop the One Ring into a volcano, flying over it would have been very helpful.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, It wasn't like the
That's
ring
right,
wraiths.
Internet. I went there.
It's not like the ring wraiths were riding around on freaking demon wyverns that could have killed the eagles.
They don't know which direction you're coming from.
Really? He could sense where the ring was. He knew it. He knew when it was near the volcano.
but he didn't know where.
I'm pretty sure the birds would give it away.
We hide behind this rock. We've been hidden from the view of Sauron.
No. So, yeah, the logic of it. Yeah. So, read the Hobbit book. Watch the Hobbit movies, I guess. If you can read the Lord of the Rings book, I guess is our... It's not going to be as good as the movies. The movies are fun. They're bombastic and incredible.
Movies are so good.
Read The Hobbit, watch The Lord of the Rings.
There you go.
Is my takeaway for today.
So you can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/In1sken, INONESKEN. No spaces, no apostrophe. We're on SoundCloud and iTunes. And if you need to contact us, we're at in1sken@gmail.com. We have a Twitter, but I don't think anybody does anything with it. I know I haven't.
If you're a Twitter person, hit us up and we'll start. It'll be a very personal experience. We'll just Twitter backwards and forwards. It'll be a very personal experience.
Because I do a lot of the, I pay attention to SoundCloud and Facebook. Not so much Gmail. I figured somebody else was. Hopefully no one sent us a message and we missed it.
You actually make a good point. I should check the Gmail.
I've been checking the Gmail. Don't worry. I've been checking the Gmail.
I was like, man, we are bad at this.
No.
I can't do everything.
And regarding...
30% of the group is here.
And regarding the emails, guys, give us your opinion on any of the topics we've talked about. We're not experts. We're just four people who are happy to give our opinion on anything, and we'd love to hear your opinion on the same topics as well.
Or, questions.
Yes. If there's anything you want to know, let us know, and we will let you know. And that's all there is to know. And knowing is half the battle. The rest is the horrible, horrible killing. Good night, everybody. Or goodbye.